Well, Jim, we have plenty of time to go over some fun stuff. And of course, we have some reviews and questions, some big topics, big things happening in wrestling. But before we go any further, I want to talk about something serious that just happened over the last few days. I saw it on Twitter, a tweet from Mike Tenay announcing it that his former broadcast partner, Don West, I guess most famous in wrestling for TNA, his commentary in TNA, I should say, just passed away. And I know we've talked about it in the past, his battle with cancer, lymphoma, I believe. And Jim, what are your thoughts and anything you want to say about Don West?
Well, yeah, it obviously it wasn't unexpected because we had mentioned, I think it was, probably 3 or 4 months ago was his GoFundMe, which still may be active. I don't know. And if you can search it out, but, we were having some fun with Scott D'Amore and because he was matching all the donations that week. So we amplified it a little bit. And I think we stuck D'Amore for about 15 grand and he loved every minute of it. Because a lot of people tweeted about, I've made mention, I don't tweet about people dying anymore because it's just, what do you say and blah, blah, blah in a tweet. But the outpouring from everybody that had ever worked with Don or even that didn't know him, Michael Cole, and obviously with approval, mentioned it on SmackDown this past Friday. And the WWE as a company and the producing the Ric Flair video completely overlooked his 5 years or whatever in TNA. It was never mentioned, but they mentioned Don West on SmackDown on network television. Everybody loved Don West, and you couldn't not if you ever met him. And that, he was even good natured. He took some heat early on from people because he had absolutely no wrestling experience. Jeff, I think, and his dad, Jerry, one or the other, both had seen Don on the Home Shopping channel. I mean, Don had even been parodied on Saturday Night Live, from
Shop
his
at
work
Home.
or Shop at Home. One of the, I'm not fluent in all the various shopping channels, but whatever the big one was, and he was the star of it.
I used to watch that. Oh, yeah, because I used to buy baseball cards, even before he got into the Mark McGwire rookie card, which became his most notorious thing for screaming on there. But I used to watch him, the same time I was watching the Monday Night Wars, I was watching Don West selling baseball cards at night.
Well, and that's the thing. He was a gimmick before he even got involved in wrestling. And I say that in a nice way, because not like he had a gimmick. Don was a gimmick. Back in the good old days when guys were gimmicks rather than Adam, he was just an over-the-top personality. He had that drive and that oomph. And, the yelling and the over-the-top because he had that voice. And I don't know how he kept it. He just had that, the voice, the ability to do that, and the infectious enthusiasm, and he could pitch anything and sell anything. And that's what they liked about, Don's work on Shop at Home. So then they said, well, maybe this will work for wrestling. And like I was saying, he took some heat early on from the family. This guy doesn't know anything about wrestling. But he, instead of, being an asshole and go, well, fuck, this ain't any, this isn't serious anyway. He actually learned and tried, and he got to know the guys, and they got to know him. And he got, he's sitting there next to Mike Tenay, who is an encyclopedia of wrestling knowledge, but also had broadcasting experience, in wrestling, so that he could help, shepherd Don there. And he got good at it and still was himself in his own way. But he never shit on the business or didn't take it seriously or, he was involved in some goofy things until, weren't we all, because of, the loose nut behind the wheel in that, vehicle. But he didn't shit on the wrestling business because he came from outside of it or not take it seriously or whatever. And, that was the big thing is you saw everybody, not only people from TNA and an Impact, but people that have gone on to other companies and just everybody, they liked Don West. He was great to be around. And I've told many times, the best part of my experience at TNA was either sitting in the back with Dutch Mantell when we get people to leave us alone, or after the production meeting in the production meeting room getting a chance talking bullshit with Tanae and West while all of our, stray stepchildren were still arriving before I had to go actually argue with people about shit. So, obviously he had an issue, I guess, or a bout with it once before, and then it had gone into remission, and then it came back, I think, probably about, what was it, maybe even less than a year ago. He announced that it was back. In the years since he'd been out of wrestling, he had taken a job. He was in Washington State, and what is the name of that town? Wenatchee? He'd taken a job with a minor league sports team up there, and then had started doing a radio show, and Don was perfect for radio also. Because he, again, the voice and the infectious enthusiasm, and he could talk about anything. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that at one point, probably, TNA was grossing more money from the merchandise that Don West was selling than the fucking tickets to the shows. Because he was the one that was coming up with, probably, yes. He would come up with the offbeat merchandising ideas or ways to pitch stuff, or, we're not just selling you an autograph picture. We're selling you an autograph picture on a plaque with a piece of the ring mat from this specific pay-per-view, the blah, blah, blah. And, he was just a whiz at that stuff. And yeah, he made him a ton of money from the people they could suck in to go to a show or to get online. He was doing pretty good per head, but it was, and he made it valuable because he made it something and gave them a lot of ideas behind the scenes like that.
Do you think whether it's a Don West or a Gene Okerlund, and again, there's a difference between an announcer and a commentator, although Gene Okerlund did some commentary, but do you think there's a trait in natural salesmen that make them better than others as wrestling commentators, announcers, whatever you want to call it?
In some cases, yes. I'm not going to say, in every, I don't know that Gordon Soley would have been a great siding salesman, but at the same time, he was more of the analytical, professorial type. Whereas, a guy like Don, especially because Mike Tenay is a laid back personality and is so not over the top that it worked. I don't think, and like me and Dean Hill on OVW television, or, a lot of duos like that, or one guy's over the top and one guy's laid back and you can kind of mesh. But as far as, a salesman, I think that it helps in any television business or any television endeavor, whether it's wrestling or anything, especially today with short attention spans and, people clicking around. If you can snatch them with the meat of the matter and get them hooked on, before they even know what you're saying, kind of how you're saying it, with some enthusiasm or some excitement or some, if the situation calls for it, anger or animosity or happiness, some emotion, instead of just, well, now the news. It used to be, I will give modern times that, with 3 or 4 channels, you had a minute or two where you could get to your point before, people were going to say, well, there's 3 other things on, maybe I might like one of them. Well, now there's 500 things. So I think today you need somebody that, for some reason, the people want to listen to before they necessarily know what they're talking about. For wrestlers, announcers, or anybody else for that matter.